Had enough of this damn snow? Let's get fired up. The fight for governor getting ugly. Attack ads heat up the Republican race. And the Democratic frontrunner feels a different kind of heat after racially charged remarks. On our hot seat, the city's former top cop, Gary McCarthy. Will he run for the mayor's office against the man who fired him? And the burning question, why are so many African-American families fleeing Chicago? Let's get fired up. We start with the hot stories. Next month's primary election for Illinois governor. J.B. Pritzker's apologizing again and again after another 9-year-old secret FBI recording mysteriously surfaces. He and Blago caught discussing African-American politicians in terms some call offensive.
I just could have done a lot better. What I wanted to do was to advocate for somebody that I believe in.
That, as new voter opinion surveys show another Democrat coming on strong, a guy who calls himself the middle-class candidate, Daniel Biss. On the Republican side, no apologies whatsoever from Jeannie Ives. She's called gay relationships, quote, completely disordered, abortion, murder. And in the season's nastiest attack ad, she blasts the betrayals of Bruce Rauner.
Thank you for signing legislation that lets me use the girls' bathroom.
I want to know why people are so offended by it. This is utter nonsense. That's why nobody believes you or your leadership.
The governor, who promises to deliver his first ever balanced budget next Wednesday, responded by calling Ives Speaker Madigan's favorite Republican. Ooh, that'll draw blood.
Jeannie Ives might just be Mike Madigan's favorite Republican and Illinois' worst nightmare. Jeannie Ives took...
As the snow piles up here, Mayor Emanuel books a trip to tropical Puerto Rico. Now, not to sip Mai Tais under a palm tree, but to see still unrepaired hurricane damage. His travel companion next month? Congressman Luis Gutierrez. He may run for president and seems to be forging an alliance with Rahm. The mayor may need all the help he can get. He has to file for re-election in just 10 months. And a police superintendent he fired, Gary McCarthy, is one of those preparing to run against Rahm. Gary McCarthy, welcome to the hot seat. You bring a lot of important experience if you get to be mayor, but in this campaign, wouldn't this be a grudge match against the man who fired you?
No, Mike, I really don't think in those terms. If you notice, I haven't attacked the mayor in any of my statements. I just talk about what's wrong. You know, I had experience near the top of city government in 3 major cities in this country, starting with the NYPD, and I worked for people like Rudy Giuliani and Mike Bloomberg, and then Cory Booker in Newark. So this isn't my first time.
Well, I know you said there were 4 things. You put crime right at the top. Let's turn for a moment, and then you can take it from there, to the incident that led to your being fired. This whole Laquan McDonald video where it shows a police officer, Jason Van Dyke, shooting him 16 times, shooting him dead. Many Chicagoans look at that and they see a murder. Do you?
He's going to have a hard time, Jason Van Dyke, explaining why he did what he did. That's the bottom line. He gets his due process just like anybody else, but it's going to be really difficult to make a case. There are cases.
Do you see a murder?
You know.
Why are you reluctant to say that?
Because we're trained in something called the 21-foot rule. And the 21-foot rule has it that if somebody is within 21 feet of you and they have an open knife, you're dead. So there's going to be some consternation as far as tactical training goes. Jason Van Dyke ended up in a tactically inferior position and took an action that, you know, I mean, I've made countless gun arrests and I've never fired my gun in my police career. So, you know, he reacted differently. This guy seemed to be
moving away from him in the video.
You know what? He's moving astride him. Everybody says he's walking away. It's not true to me. Walking away means you're going in that direction and I'm standing here. That's not the case.
So you think he could get off at trial?
I don't know. I think that
But you're citing reasons that a jury might acquit him.
I'm citing reasons in police training that may refute a murder. That's what it comes down to. My personal opinion is that he's got a huge problem because the politics of this is really taking control.
All right. So listen, you're the former top cop. As you know, the University of Chicago's crime lab, the head of the crime lab, Jens Ludwig, the other day said if we did a few things, almost none of them involving the police department, involving public schools, the 5,000 guys most likely to kill or be killed, provide them with social services, a 58% decline in the shootings and the killings. Is that real or make-believe?
No, I absolutely agree with that. As a matter of fact, so the
And most of that is outside the PD.
Correct. Identifying the individuals, first of all, is something that I brought to Chicago. It was called Two Handshakes, created by a fellow named Andrew Papachristos, who's a criminologist at Yale University.
From Chicago originally.
From Chicago originally, correct. But, you know, my views on the schools, obviously it's crime, schools, and the economy are the biggest issues in the city. My view on schools is, what is it that little Johnny is going through that when he gets to school at 8:30 in the morning, he's not ready to learn? Was there a shooting in front of his house? Is it a single parent household, and does mom need medication, or does little Johnny need glasses or a hearing aid? Those social services have to surround these kids so when they get to school, the teacher has an opportunity to actually teach. When a kid goes through what the post-traumatic stress that they're going through in some of these neighborhoods, they're not ready to learn geometry when they get to school. They're not sure that they're going to get there the next day.
Okay, a lot of those kids have PTSD.
Yeah.
Teachers tell me. Now, look, why do so many killings go unsolved in Chicago? In your hometown in New York, it's over 60% plus.
Like, this is my hometown now,
okay.
just for the record.
All right. Well, in New York, over 60% plus. Here, it's barely 20% over the last few years. You know, as you know, that means that thousands of killers are walking the street.
Well, a couple of years ago...
Why do we do such a lousy job?
First of all, I think it's because of the volume. You know, the caseloads are pretty high for the investigators.
So we need to hire more detectives.
Well, or we need to have...
What would you do?
I'd reduce the murders. I'd put them back to the levels that we had in 2013 and 2014,
How?
which were the lowest murders since 1965, as everybody knows.
So what would you do that's different than what the mayor's doing now?
Well, first of all, if I were the mayor, I wouldn't run the police department. You know, I saw in the article, it must be true, obviously, when the first deputy is retiring, and the mayor calls him every day. If I were the superintendent, I would be out of my mind with the mayor going around me, talking to people underneath me. I'm accountable for the department. Talk to me, and I'll take care of it. If I were the mayor, I would appoint somebody and let them run the department.
On the street, what would be different? And how would that lead to the murders going down?
Well, the first thing that every police officer says to me when they see me is, if that's what they did to you, what would they do to me if I make a mistake? Nobody's got their back, and they know
so
it.
The mayor has famously said Chicago cops, too many of them are in the fetal position. They're not doing their job.
Well, they're not doing it as
You agree?
aggressively as they could. Yeah, because they know they want their pensions. They don't want to lose their houses. They've got families that they're looking out for. And the question becomes, in this environment, in the overcharging of policing that we've seen happen across the country. Look at Baltimore in the Freddie Gray case. 6 officers were charged before the state's attorney could actually read the investigation. She got the investigation one day, charged them the next. 3 of them got off. The other 3 they dismissed the charges on,
Gary,
and they're all suing.
We got to take a break. But when we come back, Gary, one more burning question. What is going on in Chicago's African-American community? The population down since the 1980s by almost 500,000. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Possible mayoral candidate, former police superintendent Gary McCarthy joining us in the hot seat. Why do you think Chicago's African-American population has declined by almost 500,000 since the 80s?
I think a blind man could see it in a minute. If you spend any time on the south or the west side and you look at the conditions that people are living under, we're reaping what we sowed years ago with redlining and segregation. It's really that simple. They don't have the services they need. The gun violence is out of control. And quite frankly, what's happening is the middle-class blacks are leaving, the ones who can, which A, are our taxpayers, and B, we're leaving behind the trigger pullers.
All right, so that we talked about
so there's a real toxic soup here.
We talked about the University of Chicago Crime Lab. Jens Ludwig asked estimates there'd be as many as 700,000 more people living in Chicago if we had a crime rate at the national average, a homicide rate.
Yeah, and that would be
paying billions more in taxes.
tax base, right, is what I was
So what are you going to do
say.
about that?
Well, first
And
of
when
all,
are you going to announce for mayor or announce you're not running?
so we've got a fundraiser on February 11th. We've funded a poll now. We raised, the exploratory committee raised seed money to do a very in-depth poll, which is happening as we speak. We should have that data back sometime in mid-February.
So it's go or no go?
Probably the end of February, we're going to have a good sense of yes or no.
The election's just about a year away.
Yeah, and,
Okay.
and that's pretty much on target.
So what would you do in those African-American communities where, as you know, the Department of Justice found that the police sometimes act like an occupying army?
Well, first of all, the DOJ report, I'm on record with the problems that I had. And first of all, if I'm going to investigate the policies and practices of the Chicago Police Department, I'd start by interviewing the person who set the policies and practices, which was me. I was never, ever interviewed by the DOJ. That was politically motivated.
Well, what about those
The
findings?
report was written before they got here, just like the other 27 reports that were done under the Obama administration. They all had the same finding. That's impossible. You can't do 28 investigations and find the same exact
There
results
are African-American
every
politicians
place.
who say the reason that it was the same finding was because the police behave badly in many communities.
Mike, look, we need a lot more time to go through this, but the statistics from my tenure had the city going absolutely in the right direction. Gun violence was down, complaints against officers were down, police-related shootings were way down, 68% during my tenure. One shooting blew the whole thing out of the water. We completely reversed field. New York had the Eric Garner incident. Bill Bratton didn't get fired and they didn't reverse course. What they did was they refined their strategies and they kept on track. We didn't do that.
So the mayor blew it.
I think that there's enough blame to go around. No, that's not just it. That was definitely a part of it because the police officers know that nobody's got their back. There's a political witch hunt against them. And at the end of the day, they're concerned about their salaries. They're concerned about feeding their families, their mortgages, and getting their pensions.
All right. Gary McCarthy, thanks for joining us. When we come back after this break, we're going to talk about some of these same topics, especially what's happening in Chicago's African-American community with our roundtable. We'll be right back. Today's burning question, why has Chicago lost more than 1/3 of its African-American population? Here to talk about it, the panel. Leon Rogers, 16 years in Chicago radio, does the drive time morning show at WGCI Radio. State Representative Mary Flowers, the third-ranking Democrat in the Illinois House, 34 years in that chamber. And Fox News political analyst Gianno Caldwell. Well, we just talked about it with Gary McCarthy. Mary, what's going on?
What is going on? First of all, the reason why so many African-American people are leaving the city of Chicago is because they don't feel respected. They don't feel there's job opportunities. This is a very...
They're less respected than they were in the 50s or 40s when they were flooding into Chicago.
Well, but because it was worse in the South. Remember the dogs and...
So it's all relative.
It's all relative. The same thing that's going on here was going on in the South. It was the very people that should have been protecting all the people in the South, the police officers were protecting the whites and preventing the blacks from going to schools. Today, it's the same thing. The African-American people cannot go to school. We cannot get jobs. There's no opportunity. We live in a very segregated community.
Now, the mayor says the test scores and graduation rates and college admission rates in the public schools in Chicago are all getting better.
That is subject to one's interpretation. Yes. If you do a thorough check, you'll see that those kids are leaving the schools not able to read and write, not able to fill out a college education application.
I mean, as the millennial on this panel, I couldn't do much more than agree with your assessment. Certainly, there's been a case, even when I graduated from Simeon High School, there were individuals there who couldn't properly occupy a college classroom. You know, as an individual who speak on these issues on Fox News Channel on a weekly basis, especially what impacts Chicago, this really is painful for me. It really makes me want to tear up because this is my hometown. This is where I was born and raised. And we see these systemic problems. You talk about violence that's out of control. My younger brother, during Memorial Day weekend, was in the car with 2 of his friends when 2 men walked up and riddled the car with 25 bullets.
He wasn't shot.
He wasn't shot, thankfully, but his best friend died in his arms. We look at what happened with the Laquan McDonald tape.
That's right.
How Mayor Emanuel withheld the tape, leading me to believe right before an election, black lives don't matter to Rahm Emanuel.
Right.
Black votes matter to Rahm Emanuel.
Leon? What's going on? Why have so many African Americans left town?
To piggyback off what she said, we just want a fair shake, man.
That's right.
And just speaking as the regular Joe on this panel, I don't have a history in politics, but I live in these streets of Chicago. I go around. I'm on 47th and King Drive. I'm on 75th and Prairie, you know, and I'm hanging out with people, and they're saying we just want a fair shake. We want the same thing that everybody else get. Like, so the young student that goes to Walter Payton High School, the young student at Morgan Park needs to have the same amenities. The young student that goes to Farragut needs to have the same amenities, and we're not getting that. You go to some schools here in the city, they have everything given to them.
Why is the violence up?
The violence is up, I think, strictly because our communities and neighborhoods have forgotten how to embrace each other. We were just talking that, you know, you don't know your neighbors anymore, and also there are no jobs. There's no anything for youngsters to do, and the parents are getting younger and younger. The kids are getting younger and younger. Parents are hanging out with kids. There's a disconnect. There's not a parent child relationship anymore. We homies, and you can't be like that. And these guys that are running out here pulling the triggers, you'd be surprised. A lot of them are not stone cold killers. They're scared because they think somebody's going to shoot them.
So Representative Flowers, you point some fingers for us. Who's to blame?
It's we the people, because we've allowed it to happen to a certain degree.
Well, you know, some people say it's mostly African Americans killing other African Americans.
No, because that's not.
Who pulled the trigger?
That is not true, because number one, we do not manufacture the guns.
Right.
We don't manufacture the bullets. But the fact of the matter is, the mayor of the city of Chicago and other people are really the blame to what's happening in our community. When you ride the L's and you look over and you look into the neighborhood, you see vacant lots, you see hopelessness, you see helplessness. And so as a result of that, you don't see opportunities for jobs. You don't see opportunities to network amongst other people. As far as again, we are segregated and we're isolated, and we're not given the opportunity to have jobs.
So how does that change?
How does it change? Well, let me just say this. The vast majority of the people that live in the city of Chicago live outside the city of Chicago. And so as long as we are being taxed and fined and feed to death, we will have to leave, because we cannot live in the city of Chicago. We can't afford it.
Gianno, let's look forward for a minute. How does it change?
Well, we know that there's been a complete and total capitulation to hopelessness in our communities. If you're an African-American male between the age of 18 and 24, 47% of you are unemployed and out of school.
Hopeless.
What do we need? Instead of devoting city resources to things that perhaps can go into city neighborhoods, I know the mayor, he wants to protect illegal immigrants in our city. Maybe we can use some job training programs, and maybe you can cut deals with these national corporations who just received this major tax break and say, look, we want you in Chicago. Here, we'll cut you a great deal, and maybe some of these folks who are unemployed and out of school, maybe you train them and you get them in the workforce. Those are some good opportunities, but our mayor, the mayor of Chicago, doesn't seemingly want to care, in my opinion, about what's going on with these particular neighborhoods.
Exactly what he said. There's so many abandoned buildings and things on the south side where you can get a group of young men and women together and teach them how to rehab houses. Let people buy these houses.
Much of that happened before Rahm Emanuel was ever sworn into office.
And I'm not blaming Rahm Emanuel. I'm blaming the system overall. I'm blaming the political system in Chicago.
But he said that he was going to fix it, though. He ran on fixing it.
Everybody comes in and says they're going to fix something.
But does that mean that we should hold him to give him a pass?
It means I'm not giving him a pass, but at the same time, he's not the sole problem. We have to go all the way down to these aldermen that get these positions.
Fair.
People need to stay on them, put pressure, knuckle crush them, what I like to call them.
You got just a couple quick minutes. Mary Flowers, 34 years in Illinois and Chicago politics. Who's your candidate for mayor?
I don't see a candidate out there just yet for mayor that I would be interested in. But I just want to say this. When you think about the businesses and how they have gotten over with the taxpayers' dollars, they would begrudge the taxpayers because we want a little help from the federal government, but yet these very businesses that's reaping the benefits, they got help from the federal government.
One last thing. We got just 15 seconds for each of you. Leon, you heard Gary McCarthy there suggest some reasons that Jason Van Dyke might be let off the hook despite having fired the 16 bullets at that young man, Laquan McDonald. If that happens, what'll go on in Chicago?
Well, first of all, we will be outraged. We will be outraged, and people need to speak on it. But it goes back on to they get charged with a charge you know that's not going to stick. When I hear first out, he's being charged with murder. Well, it's not murder. Like, let's give the right charges.
So what do you see? You don't see a murder in that
I didn't see a guy that got up and said, I'm going to kill Laquan McDonald this morning. To me, in my mind, that's murder.
Right, Mary,
I'm plotting
what
to get
happens?
you.
I agree. There's going to be outrage, but the fact of the matter is, not only was it murder, because the police officer stood over a child and shot at that child laying on the ground 16 times, and the mayor and others covered it up.
All right. Thank you all very much for joining us. When we come back after this break, I've got some advice for Governor Rauner that I'm not sure he's going to like. My hot take comes up next. Let's close with my hot take. Governor Rauner, it's time for some hard truth. You say you're going to present a balanced budget for state government this Wednesday. If you do, it'll be the first one ever. Nonpartisan PolitiFact gave all your previous balanced budget claims their lowest rating, inspired by that old schoolyard taunt, liar, liar, pants on fire. Look at page 78 in last year's budget. What a zany line item. Quote, other financial sources working together on a grand bargain worth $4.5 billion. It never happened. So why didn't you just call it fairy dust? When the conservative National Review magazine dubbed you the worst Republican governor in America, a big part of their indictment involved mismanagement of state finances. It's time to clean up your act, Governor. Hey, everybody, thanks for watching. See you next week.